Welcome everybody. Let me make welcome the leader of our team today, Samir. Samir Kamal.
Hi, thank you Toastmaster Carol. Welcome everybody to the fourth session of the iGTO, the International Guidance for Training Online. Our first session is about how to conduct online elections and inductions. This program is brought to you by the Global Trainers Online Toastmasters Club, which was founded on September 2017 to support and help the trainers or who is aspired to be a trainer to improve their skills. Our Toastmaster of the day for this session is from Kazakhstan. She has been a Toastmaster since 2011, and in 2019, she became a distinguished Toastmaster. She is a president of Weighty Bird and member of Online Global Trainers and member of Online Presenters, Prosper Speakers, and Storytellers. Please welcome Toastmaster Asil Josefina.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Let me quote Brian Herbert, an American author. The capacity is learned is a gift. The ability is learned is a skill. Willingness to learn is a choice. Today, you made the right choice to join International Guidance for Toastmasters Online. Today we have the fourth session. Welcome. So I'm your Toastmaster of the day. So let me share my screen to show what we have on our agenda. We have two educational segments led by our experienced Toastmasters, Graham Cairns and Samir Malak. Before we start our session, let me call Aya to introduce the role of timekeeper. Aya, where are you?
Hi everyone. I will be the timer of this meeting, and for the speaker, I will press this color, this color, this color for the time allocation that mentioned in the agenda. I think that's all from me. Thank you. Back to Asil.
Thank you so much, Ayu. Great timing device. So now, shall we start our session? Our first trainer is Graham Cairns. He is a distinguished Toastmaster. He is a member of multiple online clubs. So today he's going to present club officer nominations and elections online. Club officer nominations and elections online. Please help me welcome Graham Cairns.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, guests from around the world. My name is, as you just heard, Graham Cairns, and it will be my pleasure over the next 20 minutes or thereabouts to take a look at nomination and election of club officers in an online environment. I'm trusting at this stage you can all see my PowerPoint presentation, which should say something like Session 4A, Club Officer Nominations and Elections Online. Can I get a thumb up?
We see it, Graham.
Good. Okay. So what we're going to be looking at, as I say, is club officer nominations and elections online. Gee, how could you tell that? Because it says that on the screen. We'll be looking at tips and tricks for how clubs who are moving online, whether they want to or not, have to deal with this. But before I get to that, I should talk about the process for electing officers that has been the process for Toastmasters clubs as recommended by Toastmasters International up till now. The president of the club appoints an election committee, usually headed by the immediate club past president. Much of this information is in the club leader handbook. If you don't have your club leader handbook handy, please get a club leader handbook and read your section. It is important. I'll go through the process as it is officially recommended, and then we'll look at what we need to do to retrofit that into an online environment. First, the immediate past president organises the committee. Now, the committee is normally members who aren't running. The outgoing officers are asked to find a replacement. And here's a question that I could ask, but I won't embarrass people by asking you, but it's a question that you might like to ask yourself. If you are currently a club officer, have you been training a successor, or at least do you have in mind somebody that you would like to be your replacement? Because you should have been training them. You should at least be getting them ready, since officially clubs are supposed to do the club election process in the first meeting in May, which is, well, about now. The nominating committee gets together, finds out who is being suggested, and it reports those suggestions to the current executive committee. The executive committee, via the president, notifies the club members of the nominating committee's suggestions. But please note in mind, these are merely suggestions, and any member can nominate or be nominated. Normally, the immediate past president will chair the election meeting, which, as I say, should be the first meeting, or at the very least the second meeting in May, unless, of course, they are a candidate. And quite often past presidents are standing again, in which case you have to work out how to deal with that. The secretary takes the minutes of the meeting, records the elected officer for each position, and it has to be done in a formal sense. Normally, you would vote for the president, the vice president education, the vice president membership, vice president public relations, the secretary treasurer, and sergeant at arms, in that order. And the reason that you do it in that order, because if there are, actually no, we'll get to that in a moment, the chair will ask for nominations from the floor, as well as those that have been recommended by the nominations committee. If there are no nominations from the floor and somebody has accepted the nomination from the nominating committee, then the chair will direct the secretary to cast one vote for the new officer. And that's a formal process. We've all seen it done. I don't need to go through all of the details. This is where it gets interesting, of course. If you've got more than one candidate for a position, they can each give a 2-minute speech in the order of last name, and then you vote. Voting should be by secret ballot. The secretary counts the votes. This is in a conventional brick and mortar club. Remember, we're talking just how the process has been up until now, and then we'll look at what changes need to be made. The secretary counts the votes unless they're a candidate for the position, and then they announce the winner. Defeated candidates can nominate for the next position. So if somebody stands for president and is unsuccessful, they can stand for vice president education, or vice president membership, or market public relations, or secretary or treasurer if they wish to. There are 7 elected officers on an executive committee. Now that may change. I understand there is a proposal to reduce the number of elected officers to just 5 members, but that has been stalled because of the situation with the COVID-19 shutdown, etc. But at the moment, we elect 7 officers, and those 7 officers plus the immediate past president make up your executive committee. Some clubs will have extra people nominated, and they will have extra roles for advising the committee, but those are not elected positions, and therefore they don't have a vote on the executive committee. That's the rules of Toastmasters. You may not like that, but that's how it stands. The outgoing ex-com or club vice president for education schedules the inauguration or changeover meeting at the end of June or the end of December for clubs that hold semi-annual elections, and we'll talk about that process a little later as well, I hope. But one thing that I will say is that that is the official version. That's what we've all done up till now. But the reason that you're here today is because your club is now moving online. Whether you like it or not, that's happening. And you want to know, how do we handle this in this time of COVID? Well, let's start by saying that every election should be by secret ballot. Does anybody disagree that every election should be by secret ballot? Nobody's saying, no, you don't disagree? Good. So if you're going to hold an election by secret ballot, and you're going to do it in an online environment, which is where we are today, you have a number of options. The three most obvious options are using Zoom polls. That is a poll within your Zoom meeting, and I'll show you how that process works in a couple of minutes. Another one that's being suggested by Toastmasters International is the use of Election Buddy, and I'll put a link to Election Buddy up on our chat box a little later. But Election Buddy is an external program which will allow you to run elections. And the third one, and probably the one that some clubs have already used, is SurveyMonkey. If you've ever run a SurveyMonkey survey for your club, then you may not be aware they have a quite robust election process as part of their program. So Zoom polls, Election Buddy, and SurveyMonkey would be the three ways that I would suggest clubs might like to consider. Now, if elections aren't going to be by secret ballot, then what are your online options? The first and easiest one is to simply nominate somebody in your club to be the vote counter. Now, that might be the immediate past president, for example, and members send a private message to them in Zoom saying, my vote goes to, and they count it the same way that they would when you stuck somebody's name into a hat and passed that around the room or into a ballot box. As I say, the problem with this is that the vote counter, the immediate past president, for example, will know how you voted. But in a club, it's probably not as crucial that the election be secret. But if you would prefer to go with a secret ballot, we'll get back to that in a minute. But if you're not going to use the secret ballot, a private message in Zoom or an email to the vote counter. Because one of the problems with private messages in Zoom is that you can stuff up and not send it privately. You think you're sending it privately and you send it to everybody, and then everybody knows how you voted. Well, I mean, quite frankly, I don't care if everybody knows how I voted in an election because, you know, I wear my heart on my sleeve. But you may not wish the two candidates for president to know which way you voted, particularly if you're going to be standing for vice president in education and you don't want the president to know that you voted against them. So you want to be careful. So use private message, or you can email it to the vote counter. Now, as I say, the problem with this, and this is the way that I think most clubs may end up doing it, but the problem is that we really should be, by preference, doing voting anonymously. The most important thing that I would say before we get to looking at running a Zoom poll, which is what's going to take up much of the time in my session today, is don't reinvent the wheel. If you've got something that has been working for your club up till now, and you can make that change without reinventing the wheel, don't reinvent the wheel. Don't make life harder for yourself than you have to be. You as a club will have to decide what the process is that you're going to use. But you don't have to create something brand spanking new to do this. There have been a number of online clubs that have been using some of the techniques that we've been talking about before. Zoom polls, Election Buddy, SurveyMonkey. They've been used by clubs. Ask around, hey, you've done this. How did it work for your club? What works well? But if you're happy enough for the votes not to be anonymous, then the easiest solutions are private message in Zoom or an email to vote counter. Now, what happens if you don't have a full slate? What happens if you don't have 7 members who aren't willing to run away and who say, oh, all right then, if you ask, I will be stand for whatever. What happens if you don't have those 7? Well, exactly the same thing that happens when you don't have 7 candidates in a brick and mortar meeting. You have to work out how you are going to fill each of the roles. Now, most clubs, for example, or many clubs at least, have one person taking on more than one role. There's a lot of clubs I know of have a secretary and treasurer who are the same person. I know of some clubs where the president is also the vice president public relations. What I would suggest is that if at all possible, no matter how dire the situation is for your club members, don't have anybody serving as 2 or more base camp managers. As you know, under Pathways, you have 3 base camp managers. You have the president, the secretary, the vice president for education. Well, actually, strictly speaking, the vice president for education, the president, the secretary, in that order. Now, if you've got somebody who is both the president and the vice president for education, that means you only have 2 base camp managers. And if they get sick, you're left with only 1 base camp manager. And if they have to go on a holiday, then you're left with nobody to deal with the stuff that your members need dealing with in base camp. So I would suggest, if you can possibly avoid it, don't have anybody doubling up in roles. But if you must have people doubling up in roles, try not to have them doubling up in the roles as president, vice president of education, and secretary. Anyway, that's that. Let's look at brass tacks. How do you conduct a Zoom poll? The first thing that I would say is that you set up your poll before the meeting. Now, it can be edited during the meeting to add floor candidates, for example, and it can be adjusted on the fly, but set up your polls before the meeting. Now, you can set up a poll on any scheduled meeting. So if your club has regularly scheduled meetings, if you've scheduled meetings for the next 8 weeks, for example, in Zoom, you can go to any of those scheduled meetings and create a poll. So you can create multiple polls. You can in fact create up to 25 polls for a single meeting. You're never going to need 25 polls for an election. The most is that you're going to need 7. That is 1 for president, vice president education, 1 for vice president marketing, membership, 1 for vice president public relations, 1, you know, the 7. So don't set up a single poll with 7 different questions on it. That gets too complicated, because if somebody loses in the first poll for president and wants to stand for vice president education, you can't edit that on the fly if they're all in the same poll. So create 7 separate polls. Does that make sense? Good. Okay. Set up multiple polls, not multiple questions. Here's a trap for young players. Hosts and co-hosts cannot vote in polls. So we currently have, I believe, 4 co-hosts for this meeting. I'm about to run a poll. They won't be able to vote because hosts and co-hosts cannot vote. I'm now going to stop sharing the screen. I'm also going to unhost those co-hosts so that they are no longer co-hosts. I'll leave Asil as a co-host only because she doesn't need to vote in this, but I will actually, no, what the heck, we've got enough people here now not to worry about that. I'm going to run a poll. We're going to run a poll for the president of the iGTO club, which doesn't exist. That is us people here. We have these nominees for president: Carol Danvers, who also goes by the name of Captain Marvel; Steve Rogers, who goes by the name of Captain America; and Tony Stark, who goes by the name of Iron Man. I want you to vote for which of those people you would like to be president of iGTO, the club that does not exist. I'm going to give you another 30 seconds. Now, if you don't wish to vote for any of them, you can simply not vote. But if you do wish to vote for one, you need to vote. I'll give you another 20 seconds to vote. I now have 19 votes. I don't think actually I can get any more votes. That seems, I've got 20 of the 23 people have voted. That means there are 4 people who haven't voted and they will be the co-hosts. So I am now going to, on 22, 23. Oh, I have everybody has voted. One person hasn't. They're abstaining. That's okay. The time for voting has expired. I'm going to end the poll and we have a result. I will now share that result with you, ladies and gentlemen, and you will see that Carol Danvers, despite the fact that she is the newest and brightest of the Marvel superheroes that you've come across, I'm sorry, Carol, you weren't successful. Captain America, Steve Rogers, maybe he's just getting a bit old these days. Or is it just that people really like Iron Man? I don't know, but whatever it is. So, ladies and gentlemen, please congratulate your new president, Anthony Stark. Yay! That's how a poll gets run. For simplicity, I've only had 3 people in there. Now, I will end that poll. If we were in an election meeting, there would then be a second poll for Vice President Education. And Carol might decide that she wants to vote. She wants to be Vice President Education since she could not be the president of the club. I've actually set up that poll earlier for another club and I'm going to edit it. So this is the Vice President Education poll and you'll see that the candidates for Vice President Education are Bruce Banner, that is the Hulk, and Thor Odinson, Thor, God of Thunder. But because Carol now wants to be a candidate, I have to edit this poll. And so now Carol is the 3rd candidate. I'm not actually going to run that poll because I created this for a different club. This, in fact, is created for a test. But the point is that now, when we run that second poll, the choices will be Bruce Banner, Thor Odinson, and Carol Danvers. So if you have to add a candidate, then it's as simple as that. But you must have created the poll before you begin your meeting, or it just gets horribly confused. Does that make sense? So let me just go back to my slide deck. Hosts and co-hosts cannot vote. Announce the result for transparency. And that's it. So I didn't think there was actually anything left, but I thought I should check it just in case I'd forgotten anything. So that's the ways to run an election in an online club or in a club which has moved online. Now, I know there are a number of questions because I saw them appearing. Carol, can I ask as Q&A facilitator if you can let me know what the questions are?
Certainly can, sir, and thank you very much for running us through the polls there. I've added the 4 questions that I saw earlier, and the first one of those is, how can you address proxies?
That's an interesting question. It would be rare where a club would be allowing or allocating proxies for a club election. In fact, I don't know that I've ever actually seen that done in a club. I will tell you that District 69 has, as a matter of practice, said in electronic elections, there can be no proxies. Proxies cannot be carried. You as a club may need to work out how best to allocate proxies, but my general rule of thumb would be proxies are really difficult in electronic voting.
Okay, thanks, Graham. That was a curly one to start with. A couple of easier ones now. You've answered one of those, which is how do you create a poll on the fly? You've shown us that, so I'll ignore it. The other one of mine was, how do you collect the results for a poll after the meeting?
Okay, the host of the meeting can download or at least retrieve all of the polling data. It's collected by Zoom. Now, one of the things that's interesting when you are creating a poll, and I'll go back to screen share here, because if you are the host of a meeting, this is something that you might like to know. If you're creating a poll, there is an option in that poll for the votes to be anonymous. If you don't tick anonymous, then the host of the meeting, when they retrieve the poll data later, will see who voted and how. Now, in most cases, it will simply show up just as guest, unless you have registered people to attend your meeting. But if you want it to be genuinely anonymous, make sure you tick that anonymous box first. But you can, the host can collect the results to collate the data a little later. But you would normally share the results as soon as the vote is taken, because that's transparent that way.
Thanks, Graham. That's excellent. I'll just check with the timer to see if we have time for any other questions. Yes, good. The next one, there's two that are similar, Graham. How do we find the polling feature in Zoom, or where do you create it?
Okay, both of those questions are related to, I'm currently in my, hang on, I'll share my screen again because I think I just stopped sharing it, which was a silly thing to do. I'm currently in my personal Zoom account here. I'm not using the one which we're using for this meeting, only because it's too confusing. But if I go to meetings, for example, these are all the meetings that I have set up. And for Crest Toastmasters Club, which has a meeting on Tuesday night, if I click on the meeting, which I have already set up, then in here will be the option to create a poll. The other thing that you can do, and this is probably the easiest way of doing it, is if you go to meetings and then personal meeting room, if you're using your personal meeting room, then the polling option is in here. You can edit this meeting, you can create questions, polling, where are we? It's in here somewhere, I know it is. I only created one this morning. Anyway, it's in Zoom, basically, that's the short version. There was another question that came to me privately, and that is who can edit the poll. The only person who can actually edit the poll is the meeting host. The meeting co-hosts can see the results. They can't vote, but they can see it, but they cannot edit the poll or vote. That's something that the meeting host has to do. So what you might do as a matter of practice for your club elections is make your club immediate past president the host for the meeting, so that they can then, as they are conducting the meetings, add extra people in. Does that make sense?
It does,
or failing
Graham.
that, appoint somebody who actually knows what they're doing with Zoom and get them to do it. But just bear in mind that they can't vote. So it's a bit unfair on them.
Thanks, Graham. Look, we have a number of other questions, but as we're approaching the end of your time, we might have time towards the end of the whole workshop for those, but I'll add them now into the text chat for you to mull over. So I'll hand back now to our Toastmaster, Asil.
Thank you, Graham, for your wonderful educational segment. I love your humor, Graham. So our next trainer, it's very early morning for him, 6:29. So good morning.
Can I interrupt for an administrative request?
Mm-hmm.
The polling has confused my screen and I cannot see everything. Can I be unmade co-host? I've got a window that won't go away. And
just click on the little thing up there and it disappears. I had that same experience.
I tried it. It's gone now.
I've just unco-hosted you.
Thank you.
You don't have the power anymore.
Thank you. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Asil.
Samir Malak joins us from the south of London and has been a Toastmaster since 2012. He currently serves as the immediate past president of Connected Speakers Bromley in District 91 UK South and the Sergeant at Arms at Firebirds Collective, the first global online advanced club in District U, where he also served as president in 2017-2018. He has helped found 1 community club, 3 corporate clubs, and is the pre-charter president for Connected Leaders Online, a global online advanced corporate club. Samir has recently been appointed the Bank of America Toastmasters Program Manager, a volunteer role supporting 40+ corporate clubs across Singapore, India, the United Kingdom, and the United States. DTM since 2016 and currently completing last project for a completely online DTM traditional program. Please help me welcome Samir Malak with a speech entitled The Power to Connect. The Power to Connect, Samir Malak.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters. What keeps you up at night? Is it who's going to be the next club officer? Is it what are we going to do now that Tony Stark was elected president of our club? Or is it that the kids are bouncing up and down all night and I can't get any sleep? Let me take you back to 2013 and I'll share with you what was keeping me up at night. We had just finished our first year of a new corporate club, the first corporate club for Bank of America in the United Kingdom, Connected Speakers London. And I was concerned, are these officers going to take the club to the next level? Are they going to be able to serve the members and help it grow? I'd been reading the club leadership handbook for guidance. We'd heard about how to conduct club officer elections, and I was wondering how to make sure the new officers were inducted in such a way that they were equipped to handle the challenges that they would face and be able to take on what's been working well and move that forward. In another club I'd visited, I'd seen a Moments of Truth done. And I thought, this isn't just a good, how many of you are familiar with Moments of Truth? Quite a good number. It's a great way to get feedback along 6 dimensions about how well the club is doing. And when I saw this, what I did is I connected it with what the new leadership team would need to have to take forward. They'd know from the members what's working well and what's not. So we made that part of our induction ceremony. Fast forward to 2017. I've now been an officer in an online club, and I'm thinking to reproduce what I'd been doing in my on-site clubs with Moments of Truth as a succession planning tool in the online space. Now, the questions that were there in the Moments of Truth had things like, do your members wear name badges? Well, online, even if I were wearing my name badge, you might not be able to read it. We weren't going to get Toastmasters to rewrite Moments of Truth. So we tailored the questions. We adapted. As you can see on the screen, names are displayed under each picture. We don't need name badges. Is there a way to identify the people? So we went through several exercises trying to figure out how to do moments of truth online. And we found several ways to do it. But the end result was that you can still get the feedback and induct your officers in such a way that they'll know what works. Now, I've been studying this since 2017. And what I've learned is that each officer team, each set of leaders is a unique set of leaders. And as many of us might learn in level 2, there are many different leadership styles. So what keeps you up at night? This is a great question to ask those leaders. As part of that, maybe not the induction ceremony itself, but a way for preparing them and understanding what are the ways that they're going to challenge it. Because although I had a great passion for moments of truth as a succession planning tool, not everybody did. The tool's there for you to use. I'm connecting you with the tool. I connected other leaders with the tool, but those leaders are on their own journeys. And the leaders of your clubs who are elected will be on their own journeys as well. Now, in the club leadership handbook that was shared earlier, there are instructions on how to do an installation script. There are instructions about a lot of things, and connecting your leaders with that resource, not just by the email that they'll get when they become formally club officers, but connecting them with it, finding out what's keeping them up at night. What do they value about where the club's going to be going? And showing them how they can start to find the answers, not just in the club leadership handbook, but in the team that went before them as well. I'm looking at the power to connect. The power to connect where you are today with where you're going. Now, back in 2013, when we did the Moments of Truth at that first club officer election in that newly formed club, I wanted to cast that vision. I wanted to help them see where they were going, not just the officers, but all the members. So after the induction, we put little placemats by. This was in the traditional program, but we could do it easily with pathways because there's only 5 levels. So we asked people to stand for this path, for the competent communicator, for the leadership track. Where will you stand? How many of you will be on completing the CC10? What level will you choose? With pathways, we could say, what level will you complete in your pathway? And we could have 2 sets even to say, maybe I will complete up to 10 paths, 10 levels. That's the way our club culture took it on. We gave the vision of where we were going, and we connected the leaders then with where the members were planning to go. Now, each club is different. As you move your induction ceremonies and your succession planning ceremonies online, retain your club culture. As Graham said earlier, don't reinvent the wheel. I've had the privilege of visiting several of my on-site clubs in some of their first online meetings. And what I've seen is that they've connected their club culture with the online experience. In my online club, we've never done a break. We don't need to go get a cup of coffee for a break. But for Bromley speakers, it was a tradition. It was a way to socialize. And what happened? People broke out guitars during the break. You got to know people even better. It's because they retained their club culture that it continued to be Bromley speakers. So think back to your last induction ceremonies. Look at your club traditions and be creative with how you can make that an online event for your clubs. With that, I'd like to ask you not to focus on the process like I did, I was a process king, wanting everyone to do moments of truth. Connect with your leaders. Connect with your members. Where they are. These are trying times. They may be going through struggles. What is it they want to get out of it? If you connect with them, what's keeping them up at night, where they are today, and where they want to go, your induction ceremony will be fabulous. Your next club leadership team will go forward strong. So I hope I've given you the power to connect. Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Samir. So do we have questions? Do we facilitate a Q&A session, Carol?
Yes, there was a question from Graham. Can you point to new induction traditions that you've seen that work, please, Samir?
Can I get a clarification on the new? Because I've been in online clubs for 4 years. So is it online or is it something new?
Sure. The question I'm asking is, have you seen something that works online that you mightn't have expected in a traditional club?
Well, okay, so there are creative aspects to this that I have seen, and you may have seen with the popularity of Zoom now, a lot of kind of prank kind of videos where you may see people in an online class, and I may take a pen and I may pass it to Carol, and she may have a pen and she'll pick it up and then pass it over to somebody else. We've done the handing over of certificates. Carol, I present you with this certificate, and she'll have a printout of it there. So arranging that ahead of time might be good. I think another way that we were creative about things like officer pins is we would ship them ahead of time to people. Now, you might not know who's going to get it, but it could be like some clubs, for example, would do a social afterwards to get to know the leaders. And I'm seeing a lot of people use Zoom now for community events, after work socials, that kind of thing. You could, instead of doing maybe the annual dinner in which you're introducing the club officers, arrange to have shipped the officer pins to the elected officers, then do that annual dinner as an informal meeting in which you get to meet the president, perhaps ask questions, and you can ship some of the items from the shop to each of the particular officers, or request that they print out the particular items, such as the President's Award and that kind of thing. Does that help answer the question? Fabulous.
It seems to be, Samir. Thank you so much for that answer. And I don't see any other text questions. Is there someone in the audience who would like to ask Samir a question? Just raise your hand in the normal way and we'll see you.
If not, I've got questions for you.
Brian is raising his hand. Brian?
I have a sort of a question statement type of thing. First Canadian Toastmasters, club number 38, who was the club that made Toastmasters truly international. We always have an award ceremony because we have 10 trophies that we give out at the end of every year. In 85 years, we've collected them over a series of time. We are planning to have the award ceremony, and I'm suggesting to the members of the club, bring all their family with them and have a little dinner as we do the award ceremony. So that gives us that flavor when we used to get together on St. George's Day or close to it, that we gave out those awards. And we're going to do that as an online meeting.
Thank you, Brian. That
Brian,
was a great idea.
Brian, I particularly like the award ceremonies, and doing those online, I think with certificates, is something you can display quite prominently Shipping physical awards might be a way to coordinate it as well. But I think that's a real opportunity to recognize the accomplishments and that members have had, and encourages people to take things forward. So even if that's not part of your club culture, it's definitely a good practice to adapt.
Samir, I'm going to combine a question from before from Kevin about what are the requirements for the least number of club officers that we will elect, and put it in the perspective of what happens at your induction ceremony when you just have those bare minimum. Have you experienced that before?
I think I'm about to experience it in one of my on-site clubs, and I don't have the answer off the top of my head, but I did get it very readily from Toastmasters International using the email support from them. And I've even used, the online chat that they've got at toastmasters.org. You don't need all 7 officers to operate as a club in good standing, but I don't recall the bare minimum that's required. I wouldn't.
3.
Brian's showing up 3 finger. We've got several people saying 3 fingers. I would imagine it would be something along the lines, possibly the base camp managers.
Well, actually, if you look at page 58 on your club leadership handbook, you'll find that it's the president, a VP, doesn't specify education,
VP,
just
yes.
VP, and secretary, or a combination of secretary and treasurer.
Yes, but if you don't have a VPE, then you do have problems with base camp manager.
Yes, big time. Any other questions for Samir or Graham?
There's
Something
one in the chat, but I'm not sure how it relates. Do you recommend to share your meeting on Facebook or YouTube? Is that in relation to the induction ceremony? You're on mute.
No, I'm just, this question is because we don't used to share the meeting online. It's not part of the culture. How difficult could be that change the mindset about just gather in one room, and now we gather in the meeting, but now we can share the meeting on Facebook or YouTube. How can is it recommendable in order just to that change of the mind of the or the culture of the club?
Well, what I would recommend is that you go back to your club members. Keep your club members. It's their club. You're serving them. Do they want it online? Perhaps, this is where it's a safe place and encouraging place to practice. If they're not comfortable with broadcasting the meeting, then it may not be something that you want to do. This is a safe place to practice. Then we can go out and start our YouTube channels and Facebook Live events.
It's an interesting question, though, that I will have to consider.
That's brilliant.
Samir, did you say you had a question for us?
Yeah, and I think Brian already answered it for one, but I'd love to hear, what are you doing with your club officer inductions? How do you see it translating online? What have you already had some plans?
I saw that Nino raised his hand. Where is Nino?
Here, I have a question. May I?
Please.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. This is something to do with, I'm from District 75, the Philippines. This is something to do with the one that was just mentioned a few seconds ago regarding sharing the meeting online. I want to know, what is your take on sharing Zoom meetings, online Toastmasters meeting on Facebook on a regular basis? I just want to know your take on it.
If you want, I think you have to be very careful of what you share publicly. Like this meeting here, we have 30 people in it. And some people, although we warned them that we might share this meeting, but we really need to share it as a private meeting and not a public meeting. So that's something you need to be concerned with. If you have a private Facebook where just the members are available or the past members available to watch it, yes, many of our clubs do that.
Yeah, because this is just a follow-up. Because, and I want you to know your take on this, just my 2 cents, because there are some members in our district that share the Zoom meeting on their Facebook accounts. So that means practically every online meeting that's happening right now is being shared. Regular Toastmaster meeting online is being shared on Facebook for non-Toastmasters to see. So my take on that is, correct me if I'm wrong, my take on that is it's practically exposing the educational aspect of the club, which in fact should primarily be exclusive for those master members. Otherwise, it defeats the purpose. Anyone can practically join without being invited because it's on Facebook.
Mr. Coordinator, may I respond to that because I'm District 75 as well?
We have just 1 minute to do that, Michelle. Could you do
Okay,
that?
well, I would say, Nino, this is a conversation that we need to have with District 75. If you're familiar with the Europe global privacy practice, that is actually in violation. But I think we should discuss this with District 75 because I don't think that they should do that without approval by all the members. And thank you, Carol.
Thank you very much. That ends our Q&A segment for today. I'll hand back to our Toastmaster, Asil, to thank our presenters.
Thank you so much, Carol, and thank you online global trainers for conducting this session. I hope everyone learned today from Samir and Graham. Now I would like to return to our project leader, Samir Kamal.
Thank you so much, Toastmaster of the Day, Toastmaster Asil, for facilitating this session, and many thanks for our wonderful trainers who shared a lot of wisdoms, experience, and knowledge with us today. I hope, dear leaders, dear fellow Toastmasters, you enjoyed this session and have had a lot of your concerns and questions being answered. As our Zoom master mentioned in the chat box, the session will still remain after we stop the recording to answer your questions, so please hold until we do that. Next Saturday will be our last session in iGTO program, and we will talk about the best practices of how to conduct online contests. So don't forget to register, and we will see you next Saturday. Thank you so much.